everyone! Sorry I didn't do a Doll's House diary video last week. I'm having a little bit of difficulty moving the Doll's House on and off the piano because it's getting so heavy with all of the extra bits that I've been adding. As you can see, I've damaged it a little bit along the bottom, so I need to do some repairs. I've also been really busy with some other things this week, so I've been preparing my artwork for an exhibition that my art group are holding at the moment. So it's taken me a little while labelling all of my artworks up, making sure that the frames are okay, and getting them ready for the exhibition. I've also been quite busy moving a new dining room table into my house. So if you've watched my past videos, you might have noticed how damaged my dining room table was from all of the Doll's House work that I'd been doing on it. And I've bought a new, to me, dining room table, so a second-hand one. But at the moment I actually now have two tables in one space because I haven't yet moved the old one out of my house. So I don't want to do any doll's housing on this new table because I don't want it to end up in the condition that my old table ended up in. So all of these things have worked together to mean that I didn't do any doll's housing last week. I also spent a day with my family in North Yorkshire going for a really lovely daffodil walk. You can't actually see many of the daffodils here, they were on the other side of the stream, but the walk was absolutely beautiful. It was quite a cold day, even though it looked really nice and sunny, but there were daffodils out, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, so you can just see them in the distance. And this daffodil walk inspired me for this week's Doll's House miniature make, because I decided that I would like to make some miniature daffodils to go into the little flower baskets outside the windows of my doll's house. I'm not sure in which parts of the world daffodils will grow. I'm in England and they are spring flowers, so they appear in sort of March, April time, and they're such cheerful flowers, so they have yellow flower heads with sort of like a trumpet in the middle that is either yellow or orange. There's lots of different varieties, and they're just a really happy, lovely flower to see appearing in the spring. So, I wanted to make some miniature daffodils. I decided that I was going to use some wire, and I have this beading wire which came in this little set that I bought second hand that came with the pliers and all of the jewellery making materials, and I decided to put some of this wire inside the stalks and the leaves of my daffodils so that when they're finished I could bend them a little bit and put them into different positions. So I started by cutting different lengths of this wire for the stalks of my daffodils. Next I used some masking tape and I stuck the stalks down onto the masking tape. I then cut each little stalk out, so I cut really close to the wire on one side, and then I carefully folded the masking tape around the wire. I was just using the pliers here to hold it in place. I decided to remove a little bit more of the masking tape because I wanted the stalk to be thin. I didn't want too much masking tape wrapped around it, but I needed enough masking tape wrapped around the wire so that I could colour it in. Because in a second you will see that I use a felt tip to colour in the masking tape to make the colour of the stalk. I made sure that it was all stuck down and that all of the wire was covered before I started to colour it in. I just popped a bit of masking tape down here so that I didn't get any felt tip onto the surface that I was working on. And I started by using this lime green felt tip. You might notice just in the corner of the screen there that my cat is almost sat on top of the surface that I'm working on. I had to be really careful to make sure that she didn't sit on top of any of the wire and any of the tools that I was using. I also added a little bit of dark green, and this is what the stalk was looking like. So I continued and made all of the stalks for all of my daffodils in exactly the same way. Daffodils tend to grow in bunches, so I wanted to make quite a few so that I could put a few together in my little flower baskets in my doll's house. So you might notice to the left there that there are some more strips of wire. These are what I was going to use for the leaves. So this time I stuck them down to the masking tape, but instead of wrapping the masking tape around, I took a second piece of masking tape and stuck it directly over the top. Then it was time to start cutting out the leaf shapes. So the wire was going to act as the sort of vein that runs down the centre of the leaves. So I made sure that the tape was stuck down properly on either side of this piece of wire before I started to cut the leaves out. And I wanted to try and make enough leaves so that I had 2 for each daffodil. I then coloured them in the same colour as I'd done the stalks, so I started with this lime green colour and then added a little bit of the darker green, and of course I painted, well, coloured in both sides. Next it was time to start working on the flower. So I removed that piece of masking tape because the flower is going to be yellow, so I didn't want to get any of the green on it. And I stuck 2 pieces of masking tape together, and then I coloured in both sides yellow. I put this to one side to dry for a little while, and then I started to work on the trumpets that go inside the flower head. So to do this, I started with a small piece of masking tape and I ripped about 1/4 of the masking tape away. Then I placed the stalk in this position here, about 3/4 of the way up the piece of masking tape. And I folded over the side to hold the stalk in place. And then I folded the flat edge of the masking tape at the top here, so it still left a sticky edge underneath. So I then turned this masking tape around like this, and the sticky edge obviously stuck to the surface of the masking tape as it wrapped around, and this started to make a tube shape or a cone shape. I used some little scissors to trim it down. This part of the flower could be yellow or it could be orange. I decided to start with a yellowy colour, but then I actually changed it to the orange because I thought it looked a little bit better. Next, I used the piece of masking tape that I'd coloured in yellow and cut out a sort of like a star shape, but with petals rather than points. And I laid this onto my rubber and I just used a bradawl to carefully pop a hole in the centre. The reason I used a rubber was just so that I could push down without damaging the surface below. And then I carefully removed the bradawl. I actually punctured another hole just next to the original one and merged them together to make the hole slightly bigger. I then slid the stalk through, like this. Now obviously at this point the trumpet was a bit too big, but that's okay because I was going to trim it down. I added a little bit of glue just to make sure that the petals stayed in place. You might notice that I hadn't coloured all of the trumpet in orange. At the base of it, I left that white because that actually sits below the petals. You can see it there. And if you study a daffodil, it does tend to have a little bit of almost like a paper-like consistency that goes up near the top of the stalk, just underneath the petals. So here I'm just opening out that trumpet a little bit because it had just folded in on itself when I'd cut it. And I'd actually cut it a little bit too short. So in a moment you will notice that I actually trimmed down the size of the petals, just to try and make the proportion of the petals and the trumpet look correct. I was folding the petals in a little bit here, just to make it look a little bit more realistic. So for my future daffodils after this one, I knew not to cut the trumpet too short, but it's quite nice to have a variety of different sizes and shapes. And once I'd finished the flower head, it was time to stick down 2 of the leaves to the bottom of the stem. I folded these leaves a little bit around the wire, just to give them a little bit of shape, and this is what my daffodil was looking like. You might notice a daffodil already finished in the background. That's because I had a little practice first before filming this bit. What do you think? I then went on to make more daffodils, and I feel like I was more confident with each one that I made. The nice thing about putting a little bit of wire inside was that I could bend them and they would hold their position. I actually decided to bend the flowers down a little bit because they don't always point straight up into the air like that. I took my daffodil into the garden because I wanted to compare it to a real daffodil. It was really hard to photograph these daffodils because they're so small. And now it was time to pop them onto the doll's house. So I'd stuck some moss down into the flower basket here. Now here I'm gluing down the daffodils. This is actually a mistake because I'd forgotten that I was planning on making different flowers for the different seasons so that I could replace them throughout the year and change them in my doll's house. But the daffodils are now stuck into place. So I guess I'm going to have daffodils all year round, but they're lovely and cheerful, so I don't mind too much. Maybe I should put some winter plants in this basket too, alongside the daffodils, and I can have every season together. I hadn't put the moss into this part yet. Now, when I did it, I managed to get the moss everywhere because I had glue on my hands and it was just sticking to everything. This is just moss that I'd taken from my garden that had dried out, so it's the same moss that I'd previously used at the bottom of the brickwork, if you've watched the brickwork video. I pointed my daffodils in the direction of my window because I know that they like to point towards the sun. When I say my window, I mean my real window in my house. So here are my daffodils. I'd love to hear what you think, and if you have a go at making your own daffodils, please post a picture on Instagram if you have Instagram and tag me in it at the Little Mouse's house, because I'd love to see what yours look like. Thanks so much for watching. I do hope that you have a lovely week, and I'll see you next time.